Well, yeah. Let me get started here. So, on the way over here, I had an interesting experience. You know, I live about half a block away, and I have to cross the street to get over here. And I looked both ways. There's a car way down at the end of the block, because I cross on the corner, and there's somebody way down at the other end of the corner. And I crossed the street, and not only did this guy speed up in a residential area where the speed limit's 25 miles an hour in here, the guy had to be doing 35. He swerved to come at me, and he brushed against my coat. And I was already on the other side of the street. And as he brushed against my coat, he honked. I mean, the guy had to speed up to get me, to get that close to me. He had to swerve from the middle of the street toward the sidewalk where I was standing. And then he had the chutzpah to honk like I was wrong. So that was an interesting thing. So I shouted the obligatory profanity, you know, the one that begins with an F and ends with a U. And I said, now wait a minute. Somebody's got to explain to this guy that in the state of Illinois, a pedestrian always, under all circumstances, has the right of way. Cars do not. Driving in Illinois is a privilege, not a right. So I started walking to the car. The guy turns around and looks at me and then drives like hell to get out of the way. He was scared. He had this look on his face like, oh my God, this person's going to talk to me. So I was angry. I was angry for about 3 minutes. I was angry because the guy had gone out of his way, nearly injured me, came close to injure me. The possibility existed. But there were other pedestrians on the street as well, crossing the street at that corner. So it was interesting. It was interesting. So I noticed, though, after my mental anger had subsided, my body was still responding. 20 minutes later, during the meditation, as a matter of fact, I still felt the stomach queasiness, the nervousness, the agitation, even though the mind had stopped. So that's how anxiety can affect us, and that's the topic of this afternoon's workshop. So I won't get into it now, and you know, I don't want to spoil the ending for those of you that are coming this afternoon. Anyway, it's nice to see so many people here. We haven't been this crowded in this room in a long time. There are 11 of us in here, in this itty bitty little room. That's amazing. Anyway, so I was asked outside, who is this Amitabha guy and what is a Pure Land retreat day? Because we're going to have one of those shortly, and I'm having one tomorrow. And what is that? And why is Amitabha so important? If, as I have said before, Amitabha does not represent a physical being that lives out in space somewhere. Amitabha is important, especially to Mahayana Buddhism, for many, many, many reasons. The least of which being that he is the most popular Buddha in East Asia, even more so than Shaku Muni, as a deity, not a deity, as a Buddha to go to for assistance in times of need. Shakyamuni you go to for teaching, and Amitabha you go to when you're in need. This is the feeling amongst a lot of East Asians. And even in the United States, where Jodo Shinshu has such a foothold, and Pure Land Buddhism, Xingtu, the Chinese version, has such a great foothold here in the United States, although Americans are virtually unaware of the existence of Pure Land Buddhism. Of course, they're unaware of other Buddhisms as well, Tendai, Kyoan, the Amitabha Sakha school. The Americans are pretty oblivious to most forms of Buddhism. If it's not the Dalai Lama and it's not Zen, who cares? You know. So Pure Land is fascinating because it comes closest to looking like a religion of all the forms of Buddhism, and the look is very superficial, very superficial. It is helpful to many people to imagine Amitabha as a literal being who lives in a place called Sukhavati, meaning sweet harbor or sweet haven. And he has created a pure land, and he became a Buddha by making 48 vows. In my personal view, has altered since being involved with Pure Land Buddhism. I had originally also taken Amitabha to be literal truth. Back in the days when I was very naive about Mahayana. Remember, I come from a Theravada background. So in searching out and seeking out Mahayana Buddhism and studying it, I had to come to a lot of soul searching, if soul is a good word to use in light of the anatta teachings. Anatta literally meaning no soul, no self, or even without a soul. So we have to be careful on what terms we use. So when I first encountered Amitabha, I was taught that he was a literal being that existed in time and space, and that he had been a bodhisattva in a former lifetime, and then he attained enlightenment, becoming Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of infinite life and infinite light. Well, having begun my life, my secular career as a historian and a linguist, I had to research this thoroughly. And I found out that Amitabha is the oldest known cosmic Buddha within the context of human history. First was Shaku Mui, Siddhartha Gautama, then Amitabha arose, and then others. And Amitabha arose around 150, 200 BCE, before the Common Era. And it was interesting to me to find out that, and this is based on a statue. Well, in order for the statue to have been made, it is interesting to realize that Amitabha had to have been used as an object of meditation and as an object of teaching and devotion long before that statue was made. And that statue was made about 150 BCE. So we're talking maybe 100 years longer, maybe 200 years longer. Well, that would put us pretty close to the time of the Third Council, when the Pali Canon was solidified into its present form. And I think it's important to note that the historical Buddha never taught anything about Amitabha. Amitabha is a human invention. Okay? The sutras about Amitabha are a human invention. And Amitabha becomes very, 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 very important because he's symbolic of the infinite wisdom which abounds in the universe, and also the infinite compassion that is available to us in the universe. And that connection of being infinitely wise and infinitely compassionate identifies and makes co-equal both wisdom and compassion. They're the same. They have the same strength, the same qualities. Wisdom is not cold, hard, and sterile. Compassion is not maudlin and much to do with sympathy or pity. So the whole complexion of wisdom and compassion changes at that point when we take it on this level. If it is helpful for you to personify wisdom and compassion as a Buddha who wears red robes, and that's probably why I'm wearing red today, or as a red-skinned Buddha, then fine, go ahead. That's great. Nobody's going to fault you for that. When I was studying for my Zen ordination, Soto Zen ordination in Suzuki's lineage, combined lineage, Suzuki and Katagiri actually, it was interesting to me that somebody asked me why I shaved my head. And I said, well, because I took monk's precepts years ago, and it's just a habit now. I just shave my head. I have no idea what color my hair is or how bald I actually am at this point. So it's been 40 some years. It'll be 46 years that I've been doing this monk thing. So, and about 20 of them looking like I do today. There was a 10-year period where I grew hair. I used to be able to sit on it. I grew it that long. My beard came out to here. It was like I looked like a hillbilly. Okay. Anyway, so anyway, they said, "Isn't that just for monks?" And I said, "Well, I've been ordained, and I went through my history, and I mentioned that I had been ordained to teach in Jodo and Shinto." And the person like looked at me and really funny looked at me. This was a Zen priest who was going for his Roshi thingy, and his wife asked, "Well, what is that?" And he looked with a disgust and said, "Pure Land." And like Pure Land isn't something that we talk about in polite company. And this guy was labeled as an arahat by the abbess of the center we were at. And if this guy was an arahat, then I'm Bozo the Clown. I mean, arahants aren't supposed to be judgmental. Anyway, so Pure Land gets a bad rap because Pure Land has qualities about it which appear on the surface not to be very Buddhist, because it involves worship of a Buddha other than Shaku Muni. let's get this straight and clarify that right now and be perfectly clear about what goes on. We've been talking for the last month or two about Yogacara, Buddhist psychology. And let's go all the way back to the Sabha Sutta. I believe that's, it's in the Samyutta Nikaya, one of the earliest teachings in Buddhism. I think it's 3523, I'm not sure. It's either 3523 or 2335, I'm not sure which, but it's one of those. It's called the Sabha Sutta, S-A-B-B-E. The All. On Access to Insight, just type in the search box, The All, and you'll find it. Very, very important sutta. And it explains why Pure Land Buddhism ought to work. Very simple, very short. What is the all? Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, taste consciousness, body consciousness, thinking, thought consciousness, the 6 senses. That is the all. So when we talk about Amitabha Buddha, we are talking about something which exists within this all. When we talk about Dharmakaya, we are talking about something which for us as human beings exists within this all. It doesn't exist anywhere else for us. It may exist somewhere else, but that's not where we're experiencing it. It's like anything else we experience. We experience it in the mind. And the mind transforms the experience into whatever we want it to be. Amitabha is no different. When we talk about Amitabha, when we consider Amitabha, we are talking about something which we are conceptualizing and relating to. In a very real sense, when we understand the Amitabha teachings, when we understand the teachings on compassion and wisdom, and we visualize Amitabha, or we chant Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Amida Butsu, or Namo Amitofo, or whatever language. I used to do it in Vietnamese because I have a soft spot in my heart for the Vietnamese. We internalize it. We become not one with Amitabha, we become Amitabha. Serious as a heart attack here. The person who is contemplating rape, watching a TV show where a rape is taking place, at the moment that they're witnessing that rape and contemplating that rape, they become a rapist. At the moment a person contemplates ice cream, they become ice cream. When we're imagining something, we become the something we imagine. This is how karma works. This is why what we think is extraordinarily important. What we invest energy of thinking into is incredibly important. The Buddha never said you become what you think. That's one of those phony quotes we see online and read in books. He never said that. What he said is that we are heir to our karma. We stand on our karma. We become our karma. That's what he said. And karma is not necessarily a line of thought. It is every conscious thought, every conscious decision we have ever made. Yeah, we'll do a class on karma someday soon, because that too is an excrementally important topic. That was a poor choice of words. Anyway, so we become this Amitabha. Infinite wisdom and infinite compassion do not exist somewhere out there in some universe. It exists in here, in this universe. And when we're practicing Amitabha practices, Pure Land practices, we are culling out that wisdom and compassion so we can exemplify it, so we can make it manifest in our world. I have often said the universe is very user-friendly. What we put into it, we get back. If a person is afraid, very fearful, he puts fear into the universe. And the universe, in response, gives him a lot of stuff to be afraid of. But also, if we put a lot of love into the universe gives us a lot of stuff to love back. What is the universe? The eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the taste consciousness, the body consciousness, thinking, mental consciousness. This is the universe because it is the all. All that there is are our six senses and how we respond to them. There's nothing outside of that. Yeah, so we are interpreting our universe. So the more we focus on Amitabha, the more wisdom and compassion we find in our universe, in our experience of the universe. I did not say that there is nothing out there. I'm just saying that the stuff that is out there is not what we're directly experiencing. What we're directly experiencing is our interpretation, our perception of what's out there. And how we color and flavor the mind will determine how we are seeing and experiencing that stuff that is out there. A person who is an experienced mountain climber will look at a mountain much differently than a person who has never seen a mountain. A person who likes coffee will experience coffee much differently than a person who prefers tea. A person who practices Pure Land Buddhism has a different relationship to the world than a person who practices, let's say, Zen or Theravada Buddhism. Or believes in the literal truth of the Bible. Will have a much different relationship to life and the universe. How we perceive life is a function of karma. And karma, in turn, reinforces how we perceive life. So it becomes part of the cycle of samsara. Our karma fuels samsara and manifests as ignorance, attachment, and aversion. Where there is no karma, there is no ignorance, there is no attachment, there is no aversion. So Pure Land Buddhism seeks to alter that karma and thereby altering our relationship to life as we experience it. Let's also be clear that Sukhavati, the pure lands of all the Buddhas, including Amitabha, exist here on the samsaric level. They are not outside of samsara. What is the pure land? When the mind is pure, experiencing visuddhi, purity, that is, lacking attachment, aversion, and ignorance, which is preconception, prejudgment, etc. A thought process which places value, good and bad, like, dislike, on objects out there. When that is absent, the mind is pure. When the mind is pure, the environment is pure. The environment is without things that we can attach to. It's without likes and dislikes. It's without good and evil. It is without fear. All there is left then is compassion and wisdom. So when the mind is pure, the land becomes pure. When the mind is pure, the environment becomes pure. Lacking attachment, aversion, and ignorance. The passions which fuel our karma are now gone. The fire is blown out. Oh, isn't that what nibbana means? Nirvana? Blowing out? We've changed the meaning of nirvana several times over the past 2,500 years. The original teaching of the Buddha describes nibbana as the blowing out, the ceasing of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. That's the Pure Land. Faith is the first thing you have to have in order to practice the Buddha's way. Pure Land Buddhism is a way of faith. Faith in the infinite compassion and wisdom of the universe. It is a way of devotion to deathlessness. Amata. Oh! Doesn't that sound like Amitabha? Amata. Yeah. So in a sense, the historical Buddha did teach Pure Land Buddhism, but never mentioned the word Pure Land Buddhism. Jodo Shinto. But he did say that faith was extraordinarily important. You can't get to enlightenment without it. He did talk about purification of the mind, and he talked about purification of the all. And he spoke about deathlessness, amata. So in a sense, yes, the Buddha did speak about Amitabha and the Pure Land. Just not those words. So are we going to fault somebody who came by 100 or 200 years after the Buddha's death and made these ideas into a personification, a symbol, and then created a mythology around it? Because when we enter into the Pure Land teachings, we enter into the realm of mythology, a representation of the truth, but not the truth itself, just a representation of it. We can't fault the people that created the Pure Land form of Buddhism. It's a wonderful practice. It truly is. Some people need to take it literally because that's where they're at spiritually and intellectually. Some people take it as pure symbolism because that's where they're at intellectually and spiritually. Other people don't take it at all because that's where they're at intellectually and spiritually. And if we're truly practicing the Pure Land form of Buddhism, all of that's okay. We don't have to argue about it. You want to pray to Amitabha as if he were somebody out there. I have devotion to Amitabha as something that exists within me. You see Amitabha as a separate self. I see Amitabha as myself in this conventional realm. And in emptiness, there is no distinction, there is no difference, there is no duality. Amitabha is not my higher self because there is no higher self. One of the greatest insults ever paid the Buddha was the creation of the idea that there's a small self and a big self. That is so insulting to Buddhism because it's simply not true. There is a temporary self, the self that is manifesting at any given moment. And then there is mind stream, which is not a self at all. Consciousness is not a self. Get over that. Get over the idea that somehow you are going to live forever. The self that has the capital S in it in Soto Zen does not represent an ego. It represents a whole different mode of being. And so does Amitabha. Amitabha Buddhism, or it's best known in the West, I think, as Amidism. Is an attempt to form a connection with that pure consciousness, the purification of mind, the purification of environment. Seeking that pure land, we also seek nirvana and enlightenment. Because when the mind is pure, enlightenment is present. When the environment is pure, we exist in a state of nirvana. And this is one of the reasons Nagarjuna, of all people, one of the most rational people that has ever existed on the face of this planet, advocated the Pure Land practice. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Ashvaghosha, most faith-driven writers in ancient Buddhist history, advocated Amidism. And I see no problem with advocating Amidism here in the 21st century in the West. It fits with our personality. It fits with our history of devotionalism. It fits with our propensity toward mysticism. It is well suited for the 21st century Westerner. It is both simple and elegant on one hand, and extraordinarily philosophical on the other. It's definitely a Yogacara school of thought, heavily influenced by Yogacara, but it also contains the Madhyamaka, middle way teachings. And that's why we're going to do a Pure Land Retreat day in 2 weeks. So, some of you are doing one next week. Lucky you. Anyway, that is it for me today. So we will have questions after I ring the bell. We turn off the camera because I don't want to upset anybody out there in internet land yet again.